and the Lighthouse. Wick loved spending time with his friends very much, but he also enjoyed spending time by himself. Though a part of him knew that his friends would respect his need to be alone sometimes, he feared that admitting it to them might hurt their feelings, and that was of course the last thing he ever wanted to do. Sometimes when he was on an adventure with Fable, he wished he could be home, and when he was home, he wished he could be hanging out with Fable. He often wondered if there was a way to be among other wee folk without the overwhelm, or a way to be alone without feeling lonely. Wick was in his lantern house on the cottage mantel one quiet afternoon when he noticed the kind witch of the woods pack her belongings into a large bag. Wick could see almost everything that happened in the cottage, thanks to the tall glass walls of his lantern house and its position high above the hearth. He knew that when the kind witch packed a bag, it meant that she was preparing to leave for a trip. The bag she used this afternoon seemed to be woven from straw dyed in many shades of blue, and had two long blue straps to be carried over one's shoulder. Wick had noticed that whenever she came back from using this particular tote bag, it always had a slight salty smell to it, and would leave a sprinkle of gritty beige powder beneath it. Wick watched as the kind witch placed a parasol with the rest of her travel items. A parasol is an umbrella used to give shade from the sun rather than protection from the rain. It was not often needed in the woods, as the canopy of trees provided plenty of shade. Wick began to suspect that she was going somewhere with lots of open sky and bright sunshine. He longed to see it for himself. So while the kind witch rummaged through her drawers, Wick climbed down from the mantel and hopped into her woven bag, snuggling into a side pocket. He listened to her finish packing, then felt a jostle as he was lifted into the air and carried out of the cottage. The kind witch of the woods stepped onto her porch and picked up the corn husk broom she kept leaning against the doorframe. She sat upon the broom and flew off into the sky, setting off to a secluded beach just outside of the forest, where she was about to visit the home of her dear friend, the Good Witch by the Sea. Wick peeked out of the side pocket a few times on the flight over. The first time he saw how high up they were, and ducked back into the shelter of the tote immediately. The second time he gathered a bit more of his courage, and found that he loved the feel of the wind rushing past his face, and the sight of the brilliant yellow sun without any trees to block its bright light. The third time he popped his head out, he saw the ground slowly rise up as the kind witch made a gentle landing. They had arrived at their destination. Wick gasped at his surroundings, for he had lived in the forest his entire life and never seen a landscape like the one that lay out before him. He had heard stories that take place at the beach, and realized that this must be what he was looking at. The ocean caught his eye immediately. It was so big and so blue, he thought for a moment that the sky was somehow above and below him at the same time. Each frothy wave brought that same salty fragrance he had noticed on the tote bag, and he learned that the gritty powder that had clung to it was the sand that covered every inch of this ground and nestled between the toes of the kind witch as she walked barefoot along the shore towards her friend, who ran to her with visible joy. The two women embraced in greeting, then continued walking together in the sand as they laughed and shared stories of their lives since the last time they saw each other. They did not see Wick as he leaned out of the woven bag and looked at the Good Witch by the Sea with much curiosity. She was luminous in every way, with her glowing skin and beaming smile. She reminded him of candlelight, especially because of her golden hair with several strands of white, mirroring the silver streaks in the dark hair of the woman who unknowingly carried him. They walked closer to the ocean until the waves wrapped around their ankles. Sometimes one of them would stop to inspect a seashell that had caught their eye. A few times one of the waves would come up quickly and splash at their legs, which was always met with a shriek of delight. Eventually the witches made their way up a path on a hill that led to the house of the Good Witch by the Sea. Wick's eyes widened and his breath caught when he saw it. It was a simple little white beach house with a bright red door. But what made Wick's wee little heart beat faster against his chest was that the house was built into the side of what looked to be a towering candlestick. It was as tall as the tallest tree that grew in the deepest part of the forest, and shined brighter than Wick had ever known possible. Its light reached far out into the ocean, flashing on and off every few seconds. He soon learned that the structure that filled his vision was called a lighthouse, and the Good Witch by the Sea was its keeper. It was her duty to take care of the tower and make sure the light always shined brightly, so that sailors having their adventures out on the water could safely return home. When they entered the beach house, the Witch of the Woods hung her bag up on a wall hook, and from there Wick observed the two friends enjoy the rest of their day together. First, the Good Witch by the Sea prepared 2 steaming mugs of jasmine tea. Wick inhaled deeply at the delicate floral fragrance. The women continued talking, their voices now in low whispers, as they sipped their tea in comfy chairs. At one point, the kind Witch of the Woods pulled from her bag a book she had brought from home and handed it to the Good Witch by the Sea, who hugged it to her chest like it was precious to her, then reached over to a nearby bookshelf and handed her friend a book of her own. Exchanging books was something they liked to do with each visit. When they had sipped the last of their tea and finished all the stories they could think to share, the witches decided it was craft time. Today they both chose to do embroidery, so they each placed a square of linen into an embroidery hoop and set to work decorating it with colorful threads. The kind Witch of the Woods chose soft pastels to stitch a scene of the wildflowers blooming in her garden at home, while the Good Witch by the Sea used gold and white threads on dark fabric to stitch an image of the moon in a starry sky. Wick watched with fascination as the two friends reveled in a comfortable silence, sitting side by side while they worked on their individual projects. This shared alone time seemed to be exactly what he had been needing. He thought about asking Fable if it would be okay to sometimes skip their bigger adventures in exchange for something like this, though he worried that she might not like the suggestion. He continued thinking about it when the two friends finally parted ways with a smile and a hug, and he thought about it the entire flight home. It was still on his mind as he sat curled into his little side pocket, while the kind Witch of the Woods walked into her home with a contented sigh. She set the woven bag on the corner of the floor to comb her wind-tangled hair and wash her sandy feet. Then she warmed up some food for dinner and decided to wait until tomorrow to unpack her bag, only taking out her new book to read by the warmth of the hearth. Wick hopped out of the woven bag and climbed the bookshelf that led to Fable's home. When the door opened, his friend was surprised but delighted to see him, and ushered him in for tea and strawberry scones. They sat down at her table, and she told him about her recent trip to the Fungi Family Farmers Market. How fun it had been for her to be surrounded by so many wee folk. Wick smiled as he listened, but shuddered a bit at the thought of being in a crowd like that. Then he told her all about his trip to the seaside. He talked about the big blue sky and the sound of ocean waves when they crash on the shore. Fable's eyes brightened with delight at each detail. Finally, and with some hesitation, he mentioned the shared but solitary activities of the two witches, and admitted that he might prefer that to their usual daily adventures. As soon as the words left his mouth, he wondered if he should never have said anything at all. What if Fable became so upset that she never wanted to be his friend again? Instead, Fable stood up from her chair and gave Wick a tight hug. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea," she said. "I always want you to feel included when I go out to explore the forest, but more than that, I want you to feel comfortable. I'm sorry I wasn't paying closer attention to what you needed." "You have nothing to feel sorry for," Wick quickly responded. "There's no way you can know what I'm thinking if I don't express it. And I do enjoy our outings sometimes. I just like to stay in sometimes, too." Fable nodded thoughtfully. "Well, whether you're in the mood for a grand adventure or a quiet day in, I'm here either way, because you are my best friend. Now, tell me more about this lighthouse. Did you see any good books there?" Wick laughed and continued with his tale. He felt so relieved to have told the truth, and realized that with a friend like Fable, there was never anything to be afraid of. The end.